The softwood lumber dispute is like a semi-dormant volcano, rumbling every decade or so before going back to sleep. But an eruption could be devastating, risking billions in trade, up to 250,000 jobs in hundreds of communities. So tonight, as the volcano rumbles once again, we have a history of the ongoing battle.
Here at NBC, and Mark Hatfield of Oregon. There was.
If you think you've been hearing about the softwood lumber dispute for most of your life, you have been.
John Chancellor, NBC News.
The election race in Oregon is of particular interest to Canadians. One of the hottest issues out there is the Canadian lumber shipments to the United States.
In this case, it's the American lumber industry complaining about Canadian imports.
The battle didn't get serious for another 20 years when producers first tried to slap duties on Canadian softwood lumber.
American logs cost more than Canadian logs because Americans pay higher stumpage fees.
There's just no way that we can compete with that given our system in the United States.
People who work in Canada's lumber industry are delighted tonight. They've just won a big victory over the lumber industry in the United States.
The $2 billion decision grasped by eager hands. Commerce finds no significant subsidies on Canadian softwood lumber imports.
We feel that the Commerce Department erred. We were dismayed at their decision.
This has been heard before and reviewed, that I would call trade harassment.
But just 3 years later, the U.S. Commerce Department changed its mind and determined that the lower cutting fees Canadian producers paid amounted to a subsidy of 15%.
In the lumber wars, this is round 2, and the Canadian owners say they'll win again.
Reagan has knuckled under to protectionism, and he is going to get some key Republicans elected.
We've agreed to make our lumber exports less competitive in the United States by applying a 15% export tax.
The smiles, what few there were forced, as near midnight last night, negotiators for Canada and the United States signed the agreement on softwood lumber. Forestry Minister Gerald Merrithew says it's the best Canada could do under the circumstances.
Will it hurt? Of course it will hurt.
Canada's forest industry believes it suffered a devastating blow.
I think it was the greatest fraud ever perpetrated on the electorate in both countries.
Americans are really trade bullies.
In 1991, Canada withdrew from that agreement, and once again,
therefore, I conclude that the subsidized imports of softwood lumber from Canada are causing material injury to the domestic industry, and I vote in the affirmative.
The United States took another shot today in its lumber war with Canada, but it wasn't the blast some people had expected, and today it cut the duty to 6.51%.
It's the best deal in a bad situation. I say a bad situation because we don't have the protection under NAFTA that we would prefer to have.
In 1996, Canada and the U.S. agreed to a 5-year deal in which Canada limited its exports of softwood lumber. But when it expired, it wasn't renewed.
The United States has thrown the first punch in what promises to be a nasty fight over softwood lumber. If Canada loses, it could cripple the forest industry and hurt 1 million Canadians who rely on it to make a living.
Big boxes are the countervailing duty petitions, and the small boxes are the anti-dumping duty petitions.
Do not subsidize, stop the dumping, do not surge, or our action will be, and should be swift and severe.
Punishing penalty. The U.S. takes a hard line on softwood lumber, and Canada is furious.
I have to tell you that I honestly find the final determination of 29% obscene.
3 sawmills closed, hundreds of employees suddenly out of work. For these workers at the Silver Tree Sawmill in Vancouver, it was their final shift.
Well, everybody's upset in there, just, like in the free trade. I don't know what the free trade is all about.
The U.S. would collect $5 billion in duty from Canadian producers before another agreement could be reached in 2006. Canada would get back $4 billion and in return, again, limit shipments of lumber to the U.S. and impose export taxes. That would be the last agreement on softwood lumber.
The fact is, NAFTA, whether it's Mexico or Canada, is a disaster for our country. Included in there is lumber, timber, and energy. So we're going to have to get to the negotiating table with Canada very, very quickly.
And on it goes. That's the National.